In our first concept, adaptation and survival, many of you have learned about the way scientists study natural phenomena and how they develop and learn different skills that we learn and use in all activities we do together. Today, we will talk again about the role of the scientists, but this time we will be amphibian biologists. So, open your book on page 40 and get ready to know more about the relation between careers and adaptation to help one of the organisms facing a problem because of pollution. النهاردة هنبتدي نتحول لبيولوجيستس. Biologists هم علماء الأحياء اللي بيدرسوا living organisms، وهنبتدي نتكلم عن living organism بيواجه خطر كبير جدا. Hello 4th grade students. In our 6th and final lesson in Concept 1, I'm sure you wonder now about the title you see in page 40, STEM in action. What does this word mean and how it relates to our lesson? STEM is the abbreviation of the 4 disciplines of science: technology, engineering, and mathematics. And these disciplines focus on developing important skills such as critical thinking, creativity, and problems. And any job that uses 2 or more of these 4 disciplines are called STEM career. We will see STEM in actions sometimes in the last lesson of each concept, and whenever this happens, get ready to know how scientists use these disciplines to solve the problems, like the one facing amphibians. Amphibians? Biologists are the scientists who study a specific type of living organism called amphibians. So what are amphibians? Amphibians هي البرمائيات. They are organisms that can live in water and on land, and they always start the first stage of their lives in water, and they stay a little bit until they can go out to the land. And I'm sure you know a type of them now. Exactly, the frog. In order to know more about amphibians, we will start activity number 15, Analyze like a scientist. In Analyze like a scientist, we will read why it's important that the scientists study the way the amphibians adapt and how this helps them to preserve these organisms from extinction. The term extinction means that large numbers of organisms gradually die until they completely disappear. Extinction معناها بكل بساطة إن بيحصل انقراض للنوع ده من living organisms. والساينتست دايما بيبقوا مهتمين بالانيمالز اللي قريبة خلاص من يحصل لها extinction وأسباب الاكستنشن إيه. I'll give you some time to read the text, and while you are reading, I want you to underline the main ideas that will help us analyze some information such as what are the different adaptations, and this will help us to understand that what we know of how amphibians adapt can help us to save them. Let's start. We will start our analysis of the text by talking about the amphibians that we got to know is the frog. And there are many types of frogs that exist in the world, including the golden frog you have in the book. As for the second type, it's possible that many of you have seen and heard its sound, and it's called toad. These are very similar to frogs, and they live in wet, muddy places like swamps. The last one is salamanders. Salamanders are the third type of amphibians mentioned in the text. As you can see, its body is thin and long, and it has a tail close to the length of its body. There are many different types of it around the world. Now we come to the most important question. What are the different ways in which amphibians adapt? Think about when we said that they live in the water and on land like us, which means they breathe air like us. That's why they have lungs to help them breathe outside the water. That's not all of it. There is another way in which they breathe that differs from us. Exactly, through the skin. Amphibians are covered with a skin that water and gases can pass through. As water comes into contact with their skin, amphibians extract the oxygen directly from the water. Do you think that problems like water and air pollution we talked about in our last lesson can affect amphibians? البرمائيات عندهم حاجة مميزة جدا إن هم يقدروا يتنفسوا على الأرض زينا using their lungs وكمان يقدروا يتنفسوا في الwater. طب إزاي هيتنفسوا في المية؟ Through their skin. الجلد بتاعهم بيقدر ياخد الأكسجين ويدخله جوه جسمهم. Let's analyze how the adaptations of this type of organism can help us understand the problems and risks that they face. Since amphibians have skin that allow gases to pass into their body, such as oxygen, the polluted air and water can affect them easily. They are really sensitive to pollution, which has made large number of them go extinct over time. So what about taking some actions to save this kind of organisms? Ready? Let's start by answering questions at page 36, and then I'll share with you some steps taken from my students. Let's read the first question. The first question is, how does understanding the unique adaptations of amphibians help biologists who are working to keep them from going extinct? Perhaps some of you started to think that understanding the method of adaptation can tell us the environmental condition that the organisms need in order to live, and therefore it's easy for us to provide it. For example, the scientists' understanding of the way amphibians breathe make it easier for them to look at the causes of pollution around them in the water and in the air. Because the second question needs us to have a role with the scientists by writing a tweet, which means a short and impressive message, and the number of its letters doesn't exceed 140. Let's see what some of my students wrote. You too? Think of tweets or maybe design a logo that gives a message about the protection of amphibians. It can be a simple drawing or some symbols, and you can send us your tweets on Mدرستنا Facebook page. Each one of you could have a role. The students in my class decided to make a list that includes 2 ways to conserve waterways. ما تنسوش إن مشكلتنا الأساسية كانت مع الجولدن فروجز إن هم بيحصل لهم extinction because of the pollution of water، إن بيحصل تلوث في بيئتهم اللي هم بيعيشوا فيها اللي هي المية. Okay? So think about solutions. هنفكر في حلول. They started writing goals that they will use to talk to people. After that, they started dividing themselves into groups according to their hobbies, and each group had a mission. Let's start by the art group. The art group decided to draw about the different types of amphibians and explain through their drawings the dangers that threaten them. The second group was the mathematics group. Mathematics group decided to collect number of amphibians that became extinct in the last 5 years and figure out the pattern of the rate of extinction. The school broadcast group decided to talk about the ways that the amphibians adapt and ways to preserve waterways. For example, by not throwing waste into the water and preventing factories from dumping waste. All of them said that this is their way to have a role like the scientists. They read about them in the text. This way of thinking can lead us to become entrepreneurs in the future. رواد الأعمال بيعملوا مشروعات بيحاولوا يكسبوا منها وفي نفس الوقت يخدموا المجتمع ويحلوا المشكلات اللي بتواجهنا. Entrepreneurs come up with projects to solve a problem facing the community. They always start with simple goals and solutions and develop them until they reach innovative solutions that no one has done before. This is by setting their goals correctly and setting priorities. الأولويات بتبقى مهمة جدا. هيبتدوا يحلوا إيه قبل إيه. Which means what can be done first and what can be delayed. And they also set an action plan, which means they think how to do things and what time and what they will need. Think of biologists. What method do they need to set their goals and how can they adapt to any unexpected changes? What if they cannot find materials or they missed one of their goals? How would they think? They start to evaluate all what they have done. This will lead us to the last activity, number 16. In Evaluate Like a Scientist, we will review and evaluate all the main ideas that we learned about in the concept of adaptation and survival and write scientific explanation. Let's first take a quick view over the concept of adaptation and survival. You can start by answering the review question in page 37. We started by the introduction of the unit where we reviewed 3 different living organisms: camel, the fennec fox, and the plant of the palm tree. Can you remember our first observation? Right, the environment where they live and how there are features in their body that can help them survive. After that, we got to know the anchor phenomena, which is exactly communication between bats, and all the information we gather is to help us understand it and do our final project. After that, we moved to wonder, which we started with the main question: how do different types of animals and plants adapt to survive in extreme climates? هنا اتكلمنا عن المشكلات اللي بتواجه الانيمالز سواء كانت very hot weather أو very cold weather وإزاي هم هيعملوا adaptations عليها. Then we had our investigative phenomena, penguin feet adaptation. Can you remember what we have covered about it? The way blood moves through the penguin's feet keep their body warm. Blood vessels bring cold blood up from the feet and other blood vessels bring the warm blood down to the feet. These vessels weave around each other, يعني بيلفوا حوالين بعض. Where they touch, the warm blood vessels can then heat up the cold blood vessels. We also have learned that one of the common ways of adaptation is camouflage, and we have talked about features in animals' body that help them to blend in. ظاهرة التخفي كانت example على الادابتيشن اللي الحيوانات بتقدر تعمله. كانوا بيغيروا لون جلدهم أو لونهم كان بيبقى مناسب للون البيئة اللي هم عايشين فيها. Let's remember some of them together. I'll show you the animal and you say what features do they have. Polar bear, فاكرينه؟ Yes, exactly. The color of the white fur help it to blend in with the snow as they sneak up on their prey. What about the brown bears? Brown bears live in forests. That's right. Their dark fur help them stay hidden among the trees as they hunt. Caracal and fennec foxes, yes, their fur helped them to blend in with desert landscapes. What about the lizard? That's right, their colors help them to blend in deserts. I also, at the end of the lesson, asked you to write questions about penguins or other organisms that live in the polar regions. I have some questions written by my students. Some of them are: how do animals that do not have fur adapt in cold climates? So smart question. What is the main food eaten by the penguin? And how do penguins build out houses to keep them warm? I am sure that you have many questions like that. And remember that questions will lead us to learn. مهم جدا إنك دايما تسأل أسئلة عشان تعرف تدور على إجابات وتتعلم حاجات كتيرة جديدة. In Learn, we started to discover more about adaptation, like it has two main types: structural adaptation and behavioral adaptation. We knew that structural adaptations are physical features and characteristics in the body of organisms. And remember that we said that the most important thing is we understand how we observe and think. For example, we said that fennec fox has extra large ears that allow heat to escape to cool the fennec foxes. Then what did the Arctic fox have? Small ears. Think of the environment. If it lives in cold climates, does the ear needs to be large? Nope, exactly. The ears and the legs are small, not for the fox to be exposed to the cold. And even though the size of their ear is different, they have a common trait. Both of them, they have strong sense of hearing that help them to hear their prey and avoid any predators. What also do they have in common? Thick fur that helped the Arctic fox get warm, while it helped the fennec foxes to protect itself from the heat during the day. What about their food? They have a varied diet because there is a little food around them, and they must eat everything they will find. And this is one of their behavioral adaptation. وهنا قلنا بالتحديد إنها behavioral adaptation لأن ملهاش أي علاقة changes in their body structure. Now, I'll show you two pictures and think about their structural and behavioral adaptations and how they help them. The panther chameleon and bull shark. After that, we studied plants and knew that in order to understand their structural adaptations, we must observe their different parts. احنا قايلين ان ال structural adaptation معناها difference in body parts. طب ايه هي ال body parts بتاعت البلانت؟ stem, leaves and roots. Let me now tell you the structural adaptation of the plant and you think how it helps it to survive. Pine tree. Pine tree has triangular shape. What about the Barbary fig? Barbary fig spikes. We also learned about more interesting adaptations of plants, such as poison produced by acacia trees or the way kapok tree uses the wind to send messages. And we also learned about the adaptations of the various organs of the body to suit the function they perform, such as the digestive system and the respiratory system. The digestive system of animals adapt to suit the type of the food they eat. And we also saw how human activities can affect the adaptation of organisms and threaten some species and lead them to extinct. Until we got to our lesson today, share, where we learned about one of STEM careers, amphibian biologist, and we had a role in the tweets and ideas we shared with community. Now, my question for you after we have studied about adaptation and survival, what questions you wish to ask about bats? I have a lot of questions that I can share with you. Are there animals we studied that have similar adaptation to that of bats? Do bats have behavioral adaptations? And why do bats get attracted specifically to the kapok tree? How do bats reach their prey in the dark and avoid obstacles? You can also write as many questions as you have and send us all of them on Madrasetna Facebook page. This is an important step that will help us continue our journey of learning through our second concept, senses at work. Thank you, fourth grade scientists, and remember to ask, observe, and think always like a scientist. See you.